Good day and welcome to SCO BRICS Insight, where we look at what's really going on in the world of the BRICS. Now today I want to talk about the power outrage in the Iberian Peninsula, which are, not to mention, are major buyers of Russian LNG. Now it appears in the country that gave us the classic novels by Manuel Cervantes and the adventures of Don Quixote. Tilting at windmills, it seems that the wind turbines, their modern versions, have caused severe problems in the Iberian Peninsula, leading to severe power outages, in fact blackouts everywhere. And it also seems that the bureaucrats of the European Commission are taking every measure they can to conceal the underlying cause of this energy crisis that led to the sudden loss of electricity in the European countries on April the 28th. Now, this was due to a failure in the national energy system of Spain, and it caused public transport to stop, railway traffic to cease, and the metros in all the major cities switched off and shut down. Credit and financial institutions suspended their activities, ATMs didn't work, both classic telephone lines and mobile towers as well as the wired internet were also switched off. Hospitals had to use diesel generators, accepting only patients in a critical condition. Airports and air traffic control systems were shut down. The central water supply, sewage, water treatment and purification systems all stopped working. The external power supply was switched off at all 7 of the nuclear power plants in Spain. Now, the authorities in Madrid were in complete disarray, and they only managed to pull in another 30,000 police officers into the capital, and were actually at the point of considering bringing in troops in case there was civil unrest. Now, instead of looking for an answer to the eternal what to do, politicians rushed to look for the guilty in the situation, naturally finding them in the camp of their opponents. So the leader of the opposition People's Party in Spain, Alberto Núñez Feijóo, I think, while residents and visitors in Madrid were groping their way through the de-energised metro tunnels, lashed out at Pedro Sánchez and his government, quite rightly accusing them of green imbalances at the local level in the sense of an excessive passion for so-called unreliable and renewable energy. Now, before I continue, I'd like to make an appeal. If you like and enjoy my videos, you can help me fund the channel and my website SCOBRICSinsight.com to further develop it. You can do this by making a small donation, which you can do by clicking on the thanks button at the bottom of the video screen. Everybody who donates does get a personal thank you from me, and I'm thanking you all now just for watching. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also keep the comments coming. Love to read them, love to respond to them. Now, the way authorities began to feed the population with information or lack of it, which reasonably they were demanding explanations, some versions became more absurd than others. One blamed it on the spontaneous heating of power lines, and then the outright nonsense like it was atmospheric vibrations that caused it. So what were the reasons behind the loss of the 10 to 15 gigawatts of energy from the power grid in a period of only 5 seconds? Well, analysts are certain that, irrespective of the trigger, the global situation can be attributed to the increased use of so-called green energy and the decline in the use of traditional energy sources. Now, the recent events in the EU bear a striking resemblance to the blackout that occurred in Texas in 2021. But the official reason for the loss of power that affected the several European countries, including Spain, Portugal, Andorra, and part of the southern part of France, the Camargue, I think it was, Pyrenees region anyway, has not been fully established, and it appears that the Europeans are certainly taking measures to conceal the underlying reasons. But the fact is, all the distribution networks operate at a frequency of 50 Hz of alternating current. Maintaining operating frequencies is traditionally assigned to the most powerful power plants. These are usually the nuclear power plants. So as soon as the automation begins to turn off nuclear facilities, operators launch gas stations at fire stations at full capacity to compensate. Then a massive phase imbalance began. Solar and wind farms to generate direct current are connected to the general network through inverters. Now the latter, having recorded a frequency shift, also began to automatically turn off, removing their record capacities from the general balance. So energy production fell fivefold since only gas boilers remained in operation. And Spain only has those because it rejected the use of coal-fired power stations and closed the last couple 2 years ago. Subsequently, a number of logical assumptions were put forward, namely that the country had become overly enthusiastic about the green agenda and ultimately failed to manage the significant volume of renewable and unreliable energy resources. Now, the Spanish Prime Minister merely provided the facts, not actually anything interesting. The lights went out in several countries simultaneously as the power grid lost as much as 15 gigawatts of energy in 5 seconds. Now, this is actually a significant amount. I mean, that constitutes 60% of Spain's energy requirements. However, he didn't provide the explanation for the sharp and sudden loss of energy, which is pretty much got something I'm going to come to in a minute. Now, furthermore, El País, the Spanish newspaper, says that the Spanish National Court has launched an investigation into the potential cause of this significant power outage, named an act of computer sabotage, they reckon, against critical Spanish infrastructure. The blame the Russians was voiced, but that was quickly discarded, and I'm sure the court's decision will come to that conclusion too. Now, Europe began to directly refute the most evident rationale for the incident, and it's incorrect to associate the recent incident, which was of grave nature, with the introduction of renewable energy sources, according to Beatriz Corredor, the chairwoman of the board of directors of the Spanish power grid operator Red Eléctrica. She said that she is confident that green energy technology has a proven track record of reliable and safe operation. Well, she's not absolutely telling the truth there now, is she? I mean, you only have to look at the previous experience of similar blackouts, as I mentioned before, 2021 in Texas to say otherwise. Now, it's acknowledged that wind and solar are intermittent phenomena, and yet that does not invariably result in widespread power outages. Such large-scale catastrophic events will still require specific negative conditions to occur. In most cases, it's possible to predict the production volumes of wind, less likely, and solar, more likely, power plants. Plus, there is some backup generation that can be compensated for the loss of the green volumes and the ability to purchase electricity from other countries. However, the geographic isolation of the Iberian Peninsula as a region and its extreme dependence on renewable energy sources, even for a country in the EU, has presented serious challenges for Spain and Portugal. For example, in Portugal, the figure of renewables can be as high as 90%, according to Alexander Frolov, who's Deputy Director of the Institute of National Energy and Editor-in-Chief of the Russian power industry media Infotech. He claims they're trying to explain the shutdown of 10 of 18 gigawatts of solar capacity by a rare natural phenomena. But that doesn't explain the lack of the proper operational reserves and power grids. Now, according to the available data, the solar and wind gigawatts that were lost during the crisis on April 28th could not be offset by gas gigawatts as the reserve capacity available was inadequate. I mean, an automation process was initiated, and that resulted in the disconnection of power plants from the grid. Spain and Portugal also had insufficient power grid capacity to receive assistance from their EU colleagues. So in a sense, this rejection of coal generation cost both Portugal and Spain dearly. So in essence, we're talking about the fact that Spain and Portugal have become overly invested in the green energy sector to the extent that their energy systems are now entirely dependent on these unreliable so-called green renewable sources such as wind and solar power. I mean, the coal-fired power plants, which were not, as according to the government, environmentally sustainable, could have actually supported the unbridled natural energy at any moment, which were closed. It is possible that more modern gas power stations could have been constructed, clean, using LNG or whatever, but they were not used, and so the authority deprived their energy system of a backup insurance, reserve capacities that can be turned on when needed, and replace them when the sun and wind fail. Now, if its cause seems to be a short circuit on the power line due to a strong gust of wind, this would certainly indicate a certain level of underinvestment in the network infrastructure. I mean, Europeans have been very keen to invest in the development of wind turbines and solar panels, but they do seem to have lacked the necessary funds to upgrade their outdated power delivery networks. I mean, the situation is reminiscent, as I said, of what happened in Texas in 2021. Back then, due to a surge in demand for electricity caused by a severe frost, the wind power plants experienced serious operational issues, as in they shut down. Gas plants were unable to swiftly increase production. Consequently, the automation systems initiated a power unit deactivation. And Texas, which has an isolated power system, meaning it's unable to receive electricity from neighbouring states, had a serious problem. I mean, the combination of these factors ultimately led to the complete collapse of the power system, resulting in a prolonged period of electricity outages for the whole population. Yeah, right across Texas, no electricity. Spain and Portugal experienced comparatively less disruption to their power grid, not being completely isolated, and some power plants did remain operational. However, the overall scenario is very similar. I mean, in Spain alone, the estimated cost of the blackout is over €1 billion. Well, that could be being higher given the power outage occurred in the afternoon and not early in the morning. I mean, the EU says it's currently investigating the cause of this accident, what triggered the instantaneous blackout, etc. However, it is evident that the collapse of the energy system was facilitated by the contribution of renewable energy sources, which are very unreliable. And I'm confident that the EU will transform a technical issue into a political one. I mean, should they conduct an open investigation, there's a significant risk of us arriving at the conclusion that the major problem that occurs is renewable energy without adequate traditional energy backup is the cause of all of these problems. Now, it's important to note, though, that the likelihood of blackouts is going to increase in the proportion of the share of renewable energy is. So this suggests that European politicians have been leading Europe in the wrong direction for decades. Well, I think we're all aware of that. Now, this will raise questions about the EU's overall effectiveness, including its energy and industrial policies, which have seemed to be nothing but deindustrialization and destruction of Europe's industrial base. So a comprehensive reassessment of the energy transition, its goals and objectives of the so-called green agenda is going to be necessary. But in my opinion, the EU will not want to admit that it made such a major mistake with its focus on green energy. As a result, the EU will either blame some unique natural phenomenon that will never happen again until it does. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe, and also set the alert button so that you get informed when I post a new video, and click on the thanks button at the bottom of the video screen if you want to help me out by making a small donation, and I'll see you all again soon. Thank you.